All right, shall we, guys?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, here we go. So, all right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Akash Agrawal, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to our LinkedIn audio event, Healthcare's Digital Frontier, a new dawn with AI and blockchain. So today we are joined by two esteemed experts in the field, Dr. Harvey and Dr. Colum. A very, very warm welcome to both of you, and thank you for doing this with us today. This event is put together by Maven Hub, your access to the finest minds in emerging tech. So don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn for our upcoming events. The page is called Maven Hub HQ. So in today's agenda, we'll divide this into three sections. We'll start with the current state of digital healthcare. Then we look at how AI and blockchain are powering personalized care and helping secure data. And then we take a glimpse into the future of healthcare. After the discussions, so we'll do this for about 50 minutes, and then we'll have about 10 minutes in the end for a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for our speakers, just raise your hand, and I will bring you up onto the stage. So let's kick off the session with a round of quick introductions. We'll start with our esteemed guests. Dr. Harvey, may I request you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Harvey Castro. I'm a board-certified emergency physician for now over 20 years. And I've been blessed to be able to say that I'm the first person in the world to write a book on ChatGPT and healthcare. Big picture, I literally go around the world just teaching on how to use AI in healthcare. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Harvey. Colum, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hey guys, yeah. So my name is Colum. I am from Ireland, and I trained initially in Ireland, but worked most of my career in Australia. A little bit in emergency medicine as well, but I'm not board certified. Very much into emerging technology in medicine, and very much more so blockchain than AI, but do have an interest in AI.
Awesome, and it is Colum's birthday today, so wish you a very, very happy birthday, Colum. Sorry we're taking away your time on your special days, but so special thank you for doing this with us today. Yeah, cool.
Thanks very much, guys.
All right, so over to us, your host today. So I have with me Sean. Sean, over to you.
So my name's Sean. I am from London originally, but I'm living out in Vietnam, where I've been for the past few years. Initially, I came out here as head of BD and marketing for a Web3 development company. So we got involved with software development projects, specifically blockchain development across a range of industries. From gaming to DeFi, and also healthcare. So from a personal point of view, I'm passionate about all things innovative tech, and really passionate about kind of the use cases behind it, and the technology that's basically enabling value that wasn't previously possible. And I think healthcare is one of those very, very interesting topics, regardless of whether you are specifically working within that field. That's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Sean. And so quickly, my name is Akash Agrawal. I'm a strategy consultant in Web 2 and Web 3. So I primarily work with consumer retail and tech firms. I have over 20 years of experience, having led brand marketing and business divisions at Sony, Nike, and Walmart previously. That's about me. So that gets essentials out of the way. So let's dive right in. So again, like Sean said, this is a supremely interesting topic, and I think something which really affects us or impacts us, or something which we will be looking forward to as we go forward in our lives. So healthcare industry now accounts for about 11% of global GDP. So that's about 9 trillion approximately. And today we actually stand at the cusp of a transformative era in healthcare. We are witnessing an emergence of groundbreaking technologies across AI, ML, blockchain, metaverse, digital twinning, and so on. And I think they're all absolutely set to fundamentally alter the way we are going to be managing health in the future. And if we look at AI alone, then the improvement potential, and I think this is McKinsey's number, is estimated to be about $1 trillion in the next 7 to 10 years. So that's really going to be really very, very huge. And so today we will focus our attention on the potential impact of AI and blockchain on the future of healthcare. So let me come over to you, Dr. Harvey, and start with a basic question here right now today. So how would you describe the current state of digital healthcare with respect to emerging technologies? So what are you seeing right now on ground?
Yeah, on the ground, honestly, I call it the bell curve of adoption, in that depending what area of the world we're talking about, will adopt those technologies. And so when it comes to healthcare and AI, if I was giving this talk in Silicon Valley, California, half the audience would already say they're doing it, they're actually developing it. But if I give the same talk in East Texas, the adoption and what they're doing is totally different. And the way I approach AI is seen differently. And so the state is kind of all over the place. Obviously, this technology has been here forever. And we all know that, something as simple as ambient listening and transcribing your conversation with a doctor has been there. But it's not until recently that it's really starting to take off.
I think you're spot on, absolutely. So there is a huge geographical difference. So what really are the drivers really which are helping certain geographies? Is it just access to better talent and stuff like that? So what really are those stumbling blocks, if I may call them so, which are maybe slowing down development in certain areas?
Excellent question. I think it's a dichotomy. There are different fronts here. Let's look at age, for example. We all know our kids are using iPads and devices, and I'm going to age myself. I'm older, and I didn't have these gadgets growing up. So some individuals that I talk to that are older than me, they're not as quick to adapt. Whereas the younger doctors that are coming up the rank, they really enjoy this. And so when it comes to culture, we need to understand that the culture at the C-suite is going to be different. And then depending on who we are talking to, will actually develop and want to use this technology. And so as we look forward, we need to, especially those people that are listening that are creating their own AI products or want to increase adoption of AI at your hospital, I would say to you, number one, you need to educate. Number two, if you're going to show them the limousine, I'm going to tell you, don't show your hospital the limousine yet. Show them baby steps. Show them phase one of what they can do. Because if you show them too much, it may kind of scare them and may want them. You may have the opposite effect.
Right. No, absolutely. So when culture actually is a great point there. So when you're talking to these almost larger corporates who run larger hospitals, what are some of those things that the C-suite can actually look at in terms of integrating or at least starting to think about these things and maybe institutionalize them within their organizations?
That's a great question. And Doc McCormick, feel free to jump in anytime. I don't want to take over the conversation in any way. But to answer your question, ironically, I think it's easier to show the C-suite things that are not GDPR equivalent or regulated or HIPAA regulated, to show them non-medical AI applications. Again, that whole idea of baby steps. So if I can help them create better emails, better efficiency at their work, better billing using AI, they're more likely to want to jump on those different AI technologies, as opposed to if I talk to a seasoned doctor and I say, hey, this is predictive analytics and this will tell you XYZ, the doctor may look at me and say, whoa, I've been doing this thing for 30 years and you're telling me this thing is going to do medicine better than me? And so there's that whole culture shock. But if that doctor hears that, hey, the C-suite's already using it for scheduling and it's doing this and that and it's not totally in direct decision making of medicine, then they're quicker to say, you know what, I like that. Okay, what if we have this for our spot? And that's what I'm saying. That's that whole cultural difference. One last thing I want to say is this is why we're just now using ChatGPT 4.0. Mm-hmm. They've had this technology, but they couldn't roll this out a year and a half ago, because if they did, most of the world would have freaked out. And so there's a science here behind this madness.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think with 4.0, AI getting eyes, I think it changes a whole lot of things, really. And Colin, I'm going to jump onto you in 1 second. I have just one quick question more for you, Harvey, before I come to you, Colin, there. So you talked about workflows for healthcare professionals and practitioners, right? So I know when you're talking to a particular patient or patients, there's a lot of admin work also which is going on the side. So how can ChatGPT or some other generative AI tools be integrated into these workflows so that the productivity enhancement is actually visible to these doctors also, and so they start to accept it?
Yeah, going to my earlier point, let's just use ambient listening. There's no reason why the computer on wheels is what we call it, COW. There's no reason why I'm looking away from the patient or looking down at my computer. That should go away. There's an art of medicine, and part of that art is actually listening to your patient, but the other part is to look at your patient. How many times out of patients you talk to them and say, hey, do you smoke? And they're like, oh no, but then they squint or they say their body language that says they're actually lying. That's so important. If we have something as simple as ambient listening to transcribe the whole conversation, and I know people out there saying, oh, there's humans that can scribe. No, having this information, being able to go directly into the EMR, it's such a better workflow. And then from a privacy point of view, patients want to spend time with their provider, their doctor, the person that's compassionate. This other person that's in the room, yes, they're compassionate, but they're not the doctor. And so why not keep that to simple patient and doctor?
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. And Colin, let me come over to you now. I think, and when Dr. Harvey talks about ambient listening and all of this data suddenly, and this is, I think, right up your alley. So how can we overcome the challenge of these data silos maybe within the healthcare system, and how can emerging technologies like blockchain promote better security and as well as data interoperability for improved delivery of healthcare?
Yeah, so very interesting question, and it's actually a huge question, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And you could probably break the silos down into 3 different types of silos. So you'd have a human silo. So there's information about me, and I hold that, and I may or may not share that data. And then there's regulatory silos, because a lot of countries will have, or even states within countries, will have certain data sovereignty laws where that data can't be shared. And then you can have practical silos, because like the vast majority of health records in the world is actually handwritten notes in the basement somewhere. So how do you make good use of that? So like when it comes down to human silos, like some of the barriers to me maybe sharing my data might be like, what's going to happen with that data? Who's going to use it? Like if you look at the big players entering healthcare at the moment would be maybe the companies that were behind Attention Economy 2.0, and they're going to collect huge amount of data about me. And if they're entering not just healthcare, but they're also entering, say, metaverse and digital twinning. So they're going to collect a huge amount of data about me. And what I want to know is, are they going to use that data to sell me individualized medicine or individualized advertisement as part of the attention economy, or a bit of both? So like I need reassurance about that before I'd actually share my data. So that's part of the human silo of information. And then you got regulatory silos. Because if you splice AI with a blockchain, you're going to get something like a digital twin. And it's going to depend on a huge amount of data to actually find information about me. Because there's 2 types of ways it's going to learn. It's going to learn in a longitudinal manner, so information about me that helps my life cycle, and then latitudinal type learning, so information about people like me that can help me or improve my life cycle. But if I'm living in a country, if I've emigrated, say, like when I moved to Australia, people like me are on the other side of the world. But then with data sovereignty laws, how does my digital twin utilize latitudinal learning? And may not be a huge problem for, say, an Irish guy in Australia, but if you're from a country study that was published from, I think, a Chicago Children's Hospital, where they were able to look at use large language models to actually look at risk factors for say children that present to a hospital with first seizure, who's likely, who is a risk score to, sorry, I'm kind of waffling now, but basically the large language model was able to risk stratify patients to see who needs to stay in hospital or who could go home.
Right.
Very
that's
cool.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, go on, Sean, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, this is such an interesting topic. I know we spoke before, Colin, on our last session, and healthcare, it's such a broad subject, and such a broad topic. You've got so many different areas where technology is really disrupting the space. Whether you're looking at the running of hospitals, patient data, the technologies that doctors have available to them now. What would you say, like the areas which healthcare is benefiting most from in terms of kind of the recent advancements that we're talking about here?
That's a good question, and that's actually pretty tough. I'm a little biased when I say I really think our best advancement is this new product from DeepMind, AlphaFold 3, where they have over 20 million AI predicted protein molecules. And the reason I think that is probably the one thing that is going to advance us the most is that if you think about it, if I'm developing a drug, if I'm, let's say, pretending to cure cancer, being able to map out these proteins and being able to create predictive molecules that will tell me this molecule will probably fit into this other molecule can really change the way we see medicine. And I truly think we're going to start seeing some amazing inventions and cures. And I really think that is going to be the biggest advancement to healthcare.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's such an exciting time. I think, as I mentioned before, like regardless of whether this is an area that you work within specifically, it's something that affects all of us, and we all kind of have a relative interest in it in some shape or form. And I think we touched upon last time. You've got some real kind of improvements in efficiencies in the kind of day-to-day, but there's some really incredible stuff that's being done at the forefront of the technology changes, and I think we're going to see such a rapid increase in advancements in a short space of time. Colin, so the same question to you, kind of what areas that you've got experience in are you really seeing benefiting from these technologies?
So I suppose within blockchain, where I see it affecting healthcare, and I think sometimes you got to look maybe further down the line than I suppose then the immediate future, and where blockchain will actually affect healthcare. And I think what I was talking about last time was the development of the V-Form organization, and how in the future I suppose we won't necessarily see a vertically integrated hospital, but more the distribution of healthcare throughout a network of services. And basically what I meant by that was that the hospital is just a series of ledgers. Like an institution is just a series of ledgers. Like it records who can do what, employment records, health records, theatre records. And these ledgers they're very costly to maintain, and they're maintained by humans, and they're fraught with error. But whereas the blockchain is, I suppose it's an electronic ledger that maintains itself, and once that reduces the cost of trust and reduces the cost of information, there's no actual need for that institutional hospital, the vertical integration. So that allows it to distribute across time and space. And what we're seeing now with the medical metaverses is that they're actually the first instance of this new V-Form hospital, as we call it, where it's actually integrating pharmacy, universities, physicians, patients from all around the world, and it's actually integrating them together in the metaverse. So I think that's probably one of the major trends that we'll see maybe in the next 20 to 30 years in medicine, and how blockchain can actually affect that.
Very interesting. So I mean, you touched upon it there. So I guess lots of people have slightly different conceptions on metaverse and what the metaverse is. Would you mind kind of just giving a bit more info on how you envisage what healthcare metaverse looks like, Colin?
Yeah, so I suppose there's probably a troika of three things that make up a metaverse in my mind. So you would have the kind of convergence or continuum of different worlds, like the real world, and like a virtual world, an augmented real world. Okay, so a continuum of worlds. And then you have how you access that. I suppose there's extended reality. And then as well as that, you have tokenization of health, or tokenization of health data on the blockchain. When you get to the convergence of that troika, you get what we call the metaverse. Okay.
Over to you, Harvey, then slightly different kind of angle. Back onto looking at AI. So can AI be used to develop personalized diagnostic tools while still ensuring complete anonymity when looking at things like patient medical data, which is obviously very, security and trust is such a big thing there.
No, this is great. This is like the $1 million question. Very, very Well asked. The answer is yes. I'm loving that we're talking about blockchain technology. I always say there's a roundabout way. There's somewhat of a security blanket in that we have the GDPR, we have HIPAA, and for the most part, hospitals are trying their best to always make sure that whatever new platform is being used, it's compliant with those laws and regulation. The big problem here is that AI, the way it's structured, depending on how it's done, can violate some of these principles. And so I see two issues. One is startups that claim that they can keep the data secure and they really can't, and hospital systems not really understanding. Two, I think knowing what the data set is inside of AI is so important. And I think we're going to start seeing what I call a food label, meaning let's have a food label for our AI. So if I've never heard of this particular model, I can look at it like a food label and say, okay, it has the following bias. It was trained in the following data set. This data set does not apply to my population here in the United States. Maybe this applies more to a different person. And the other thing, to go into the weeds, we need to do this correctly. So we can't use ChatGPT per se in healthcare. We need to use our own AI specifically trained, reinforced by the right personnel in persons into AI. So for a quickly example would be, I'm an ER doctor. We should have an ER LLM. So let's call it ER GPT. And it should be reinforced by ER doctors. It shouldn't be reinforced by surgeons or non-ER doctors. And then that data set should be what's called federated learning, in that if it's being used at hospital A, then the data in hospital A should be used for my model. And then let's say across the street, they want to use that model, then we should use that model, but then use their data and make sure that it's exactly tied. And then on top of that, we should not use ChatGPT server. I'm not against it, but then instead, let's use something like Llama 3, combine it with my GPT, and then put it on the hospital servers. So now the data is inside their servers. Now the training data is from them. And then we have more control of what's being trained and what's not being trained.
We'll again come back to that, Harvey, in a second. Colum, let me just go back to you. I think you were talking about a very important thing there in terms of metaverse. So you're talking about the three axes for that. So the real world and the virtual world and the external reality and the tokenization. So you want to just pick up from there and continue?
Okay, yeah, sorry. So basically, that's what I was saying. That was the definition of the metaverse. Like that, to me, anyhow, this kind of this convergence. And sorry, guys, you just have to prompt me what the question was back then. Sorry, I had to run. But yeah, just
okay. So this is what the role that metaverse can play in the future of healthcare and how actually it is being developed. So that is something which you were trying to answer.
Yeah, so sorry, yeah. And what I've been talking about was the use of blockchain and how that actually is going to basically disintegrate the vertical integration of the healthcare system and how metaverse then replaces that. And there's, I suppose, because the blockchain and the metaverse replaces the trust that the institution itself actually provides. But there's another big problem with that. I suppose we shouldn't really forget about it, because there's also the trust that's in the system. So there's institutional trust and there's trust in that institution itself. And while the blockchain might replace institutional trust and the metaverse, and that may enable the metaverse, it doesn't necessarily replace the trust that we place in the system. And how does a patient trust an abstract system like a healthcare institution, or something that becomes even more abstract like a medical metaverse? And what we need to remember, and I think Harvey talked about this a lot at the very start, was the doctor-patient relationship and how is that maintained when we actually migrate to a type of metaverse. Because there was a sociologist that wrote a book back in the 1990s. It was a guy called Anthony Giddens, and he's probably one of the most prominent sociologists of the modern times. And he actually talked about this problem, and he touched into a psychological concept called face time. And it's about, like when we talk about how do we save face or how do we maintain dignity when we're just talking with each other. And it's that face time that a doctor or a nurse or a physio or any other allied health spends with the patient, that's what actually creates the trust in the institution. So with the medical metaverse, as the metaverse and the blockchain replaces the type of trust in the system, as it becomes more abstract, that doctor-patient relationship or the art of medicine becomes even more important, because then we have to instill that trust in the system for the patient. So when we actually try and integrate more AI agency into the medical field, and that when you interact with the institution, are you interacting with a human, or are you interacting with an AI agency? And basically we need to make sure that that AI agency is able to replicate that relationship with the patient that a doctor can. And if that can't happen, well then I think we've got, I suppose, a certain degree of problems with the integration of AI and into the metaverse and the doctor-patient relationship.
Right. No, fantastic. I think, and it's pretty complex at the same time. And there are. So how can we, or how can organizations or the folks who are actually working on this or thinking of deploying that within their organizations? So how can they be sure that they're not building they're not getting impacted by these biases in terms of either race or ethnicity or socioeconomic background and stuff like that?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because at the end of the day, as we know, these models are created by humans, right?
Yeah.
And so humans in general, we're going to be at default because we're going to have our own inherent biases that we're going to put into the data set.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger problem is going to be in that there may not be enough data in the data set to represent the population that we're serving. And so in other words, if let's just pretend I'm Hispanic, so I'll pick it as a Hispanic problem. Let's pretend that there's all the studies for heart disease specific for different populations, but in the data set, it's not really represented for Hispanics. And so if I am using predictive analytics and I'm asking it a question, it may not answer the question correctly because it's not addressing the population. We may make assumptions saying, yeah, it applies to everybody, but in reality, it doesn't. And so how to fix that problem, it's more than just the LLM. I think at that point, I jokingly say we need to call rich people, someone like Elon Musk, and say, hey, the following populations are underrepresented and we need some studies that we can put them into our LLMs. And so these are larger problems. And this goes to the second point. These LLMs are amazing and they're right, but we have to have a human in the loop. We have to have a doctor that able to look at it and say, you know what, this is not representing XYZ. My clinical gestalt says we should do Y, and know that this is going to try to push me to think a certain way, but know that in reality it is incorrect. And that is the true thing that we need to discuss here is how do we educate our population, both patients and healthcare professionals, on the correct use of LLM and to when to distinguish when it can be used and when it cannot be used.
Great points there, Dr. Harvey. And I think you bring up another interesting point of having a human in the loop. Now, just looking into the future with this rapid development that we're seeing in terms of AI, do you ever see AI actually replacing a medical professional? Maybe to some extent where a patient actually feels comfortable in terms of the diagnosis ever? Or how do you see this panning out?
That's another $1 million question. I don't see that happening possibly in my age group or in my lifetime. And let me explain.
Yeah.
There's two things at heart here. Number one is that empathetic human touch. I don't see us humans allowing an AI to 100% say, you know what, I don't like Dr. Castro, I just want the AI. There's a few exceptions, and I'll say maybe mental care, because they may feel more safe to talk to a robot or an AI product. But taking that outside of that, I don't see that being the case. And then the second important thing to remember is if AI is 99.999% accurate, are you willing to risk your life in something important for that, small percent error?
Yeah.
And then when it comes to AI, I don't see us doing it. Case in point, would you let a robot 100% take your appendix out? You laugh, but you're right.
No, you're right. So you're right, actually. So robots are putting in the Neuralink chips right now in people's brains.
Yeah. And to that point, the other part of this is we don't know what we don't know. That sounds like a cool idea, But fast forward, hindsight 2020. What if it creates cancer? What if it causes death? What if it gives you meningitis? Because now you're putting a foreign object in your brain, and if it gets infected, then you're messing with your brain, and literally, its infection in your brain is meningitis. And so there's so many permutations to this. What if it decreases your life expectancy? We don't know a lot of these things until the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're in the unknown right now. And valid point, I think to your question, even if the probability of a right everything is 99.9, so even for 0.1, will I personally believe AI? Probably not. And most people probably will also not right now. So I think that human in the loop or that empathetic touch really becomes absolutely important. Okay, awesome. So Colm, let me jump over to you one more time. And blockchain is all about decentralization, right? So do you see this decentralization someday actually helping distribute healthcare efficiently, where some of these institutions or regulate or you may not need these kind of institutions in between, or maybe some aspect of healthcare?
So I suppose is the question like if there's no institution there in the first place, how can blockchain help? Is that the
question? Do you see that blockchain actually helping in terms of distribution of healthcare in an absolutely deep
Yeah, I suppose when you look at some of the medical metaverses that are out there, and just to mention a few, like you have G-Health or AI Medis. I'm only mentioning them not to try and shield them or anything, but there's just very few examples. But that's one of their, I suppose, their business models is that they're actually targeting areas in the world where there isn't infrastructure there in the first place. And just some of the benefits of that is that it just, I suppose if there's a shortage of, I suppose, doctors and nurses, that I suppose the medical metaverse can actually, replace that. Or if there's no need for a physical infrastructure, well then, if there's no need for it addresses skill shortage, and you know what I mean, like those savings, those cost savings can be kind of put into other areas of the health service. So yeah, I suppose in areas where there is no infrastructure, the medical metaverse can certainly can certainly offer a service to that population. But even in kind of more established countries, like there's huge waiting lists in emergency medicine and things like that. And I think those same medical metaverses, as well as they're targeting maybe third world countries, they're also targeting the emergency waiting lists in first world countries as well, and then able to offer a continuity of service with new patients, either in first or third world countries.
Sure. Cool. Yeah, thanks for answering that. And just to kind of look into the kind of future of healthcare and what it holds, looking at AI and blockchain, would you say the combined power of AI for things like diagnostics and treatment optimization, along with blockchain for the secure data exchange, can that combination pave the way for a more equitable and universally accessible healthcare system, like you mentioned, in these developing countries? Is that too far-fetched? Is it within touching distance? Where are we with that?
So I think when it comes to the maybe like a third world where there is no infrastructure there in the first place, there's no legacy system to compete with. So it can be quite easy to start a new blockchain network for medicine. Like if you look at South Africa, like they've migrated their land registry onto a blockchain. And the reason they could do that so seamlessly is because there's no real infrastructure there in the first place. So it could easily happen with healthcare as well. But I think some of the like the benefit of medicine, of blockchain in medicine, in developing a new system, is that it gives us, I suppose, if I was to move into ledger theory, because there's different types of ledger. There's an actual ledger. There's a ledger that my general practitioner has of me, but it's very much incomplete. There's a ledger that each healthcare facility will have on me, but it's incomplete. They're actual ledgers that exist in the real world. And it's the same, any mobile app or any wearable device has an incomplete ledger of me. So what we really want to do is we want to migrate all those ledgers to a perfect ledger. Okay, so and there's a hypothetical general ledger. Okay, that's the general ledger of me. All these other different types of actual ledgers that exist, if we could migrate them to a general ledger, we'd have something very close to the perfect ledger. Now, there's about 11 different competencies that a ledger should have to be considered a perfect ledger. And blockchain will give in those 11 categories, a blockchain will give us a near perfect score in each category. Okay, and then what that gives us a good kind of bedrock for medical innovation. Say an AI, or IoT can write to that blockchain and have that complete ledger of me, and then an AI can actually give me insights on myself or any other patient based on that perfect ledger. So I suppose, I'm not sure I really articulated this quite well, but realistically, the benefit of the blockchain, whether it's developing a new one in a third world or a kind of like even in a more established world, is that it kind of gives us that unified ledger, a perfect ledger, as opposed to as opposed to an incomplete actual ledger in different points in different places, whether that's my GP office, whether it's in a hospital. Because the less integrated the nodes are, the more difficult it is for a healthcare provider to actually make sense with. Like what you want from your healthcare provider or any healthcare system is kind of a semantic interoperability, meaning that any physician, regardless where they are, should come to the same conclusion based on the data that they have. But there's a bounded rationality there, because not every physician will have access to the same data due to the incompleteness of the ledger. So a blockchain-based ledger will give each physician access to the same information, and then you get that semantic interoperability where they all have a reasonable chance of coming up with the same conclusion.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think most people in most countries can probably relate to at some point difficulties of sort of moving doctor's practice, or having to somehow attain old records when you move house, or you move, that happened to me. I only moved like about 10 miles apart in London about 3 or 4 years ago, but trying to get my two doctors' practices to communicate and pass over medical records was an absolute nightmare, even though they were effectively down the road from each other. It's also interesting what you say about the fact that sometimes some of this stuff can be a little bit easier in developing countries that maybe have a little bit less, because sometimes there's less red tape, or being able to start from scratch is often an easier task than trying to retrospectively change lots of outdated regulation and systems, which certainly I think is the case in the UK for sure. Kind of quickly to you then, Harvey, the same sort of question about the combined power of AI and these technologies that we're talking about. Is it paving the way for a more equitable and universally accessible healthcare system, in your opinion?
I call this the great shift that we're going to see. We're going to see this in our workflows, the way we interact. People will laugh when I say back in the day we were using Dr. Google. Now it's more like Dr. GPT. That's kind of what we're doing. And so, for better or worse, I can tell my patients, hey, do not use AI for your medical diagnosis. Let me be the human in the loop. You can get all the output you want, but don't act on it. Let me look at that output and let's work together. But the reality is, for $20 a month, people are going to start electing for using AI. And my biggest concern is outside of the United States, where someone can ask ChatGPT, hey, what's wrong with me, and go through it. And if the AI is hallucinating, they can literally go down to the pharmacy and say, hey, I want drug X because ChatGPT told me I have this disease. And so from a mental point of view, from an ethical point of view, I worry for human beings. I'm worried that people are going to go down the wrong path. And so with that said, on the flip side, I see a positive. If I was running a developing country in the world and I knew my village was not receiving healthcare, then I could see AI going into those areas of the world and providing healthcare. It's not the best. It may be wrong, but then that's where I say, if I was that ruler of that country, I would say, let's throw our best humans in there and let's leverage AI to help these villages, because without it, they have nothing. So it's a different situation. And so I'm not speaking on both sides of my mouth, but I'm saying that it's a different situation, of different risk factors, pros and cons. And in those particular cases, I see why not use something like AI. But again, I'm emphasizing we need to make sure we keep a human in the loop.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And again, sort of slightly linked to the next question would be, can you envisage a future where AI plays a more prominent role in things like surgical procedures, from, preoperative planning, robotic assistance, and kind of real-time decision making?
I'm going to give you a quick story, and it's the way I see it done is the following. I'm an ER doctor. I'm a human being. It's 3 a.m. I haven't slept maybe for 20 hours. I'm exhausted, and I'm expected to be at my best. Why not leverage AI? Why not augment me and give me the tools to help me, in the sense that my brain is tired? I may miss something, and here's when life matters and when seconds count. Why not use AI to help me go through my differential diagnosis of all the possibilities of the diseases that it could be, and help me understand? And not that I'm stupid, not that I don't know, not that I don't have 20 years of doing this. It's just that I'm a human. And so why not augment me with AI? And that's how I see that being the future.
Absolutely. I think that's pretty much spot on, Dr. Harvey. And what you said about Dr. ChatGPT is like we've had Dr. Google all this while, and we have seen consequences of that also. So people doing their own diagnosis. Awesome. I think we're coming up to 50 minutes, and I know that you have a hard stop in the next couple of minutes, Dr. Harvey. So anyway, let me just open up the floor, and thank you, Sarah and Ozzy, for waiting for so long. Really appreciate it. So I'll just bring you up on stage. Please ask your questions to our speakers now. Okay, so let me come over to you, Ozzy. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. One thing that comes across to me in all these discussions about AI and medicine is kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. One of the key advancements that have paralleled and preceded the large language models have been advances in physiological sensors. And I've been following those for over 20 years. I'm an engineer and not a clinician, but I've been testing them and working with my doctors on these sensors. Let me offer you a couple of examples where the two come together. And the first was with COVID. I contracted COVID, but because I use my own physiological data in research, it's hard to obtain other people's data. I went back and looked at my tracings, and what they showed was interesting. It showed that it first manifested in my cardiovascular system. In terms of my resting heart rate increased by 50%. And about a day and a half later, my blood oxygen level started jumping all over the place. So I sent that to my doctor. He looked at it and said, well, I've never seen this before. Well, they weren't looking for it before. So anyway, that's example one. The other one happened a few weeks ago. Regular checkup, asked me what was going on with me. I said, well, I had this symptom. It's more of a nag than anything else. And then I showed him my data, and I said, well, this is it's happened before, so I think I know what it is. He looked at it and said, well, that's not the way that it normally happens. Here's what the literature says. Well, here's the thing. I had years of data that showed that, for me at least, that is how my system works. And other doctors have validated that. So I went, got some over-the-counter drugs, and took them, and that took care of the problem. One of the issues that we're not acknowledging oftentimes is that the gap, the knowledge gap between doctors and patients is being narrowed by these technologies, at least as perceived by patients. And that empowerment is going to have real impact on the practice of medicine. And from my perspective, someone who's been following this for more than 2 decades, the changes that I've seen in the last 5 years have been phenomenal, have been unprecedented. And this is something we need to consider when we talk about LLMs and like ChatGPT. I actually, when I want ChatGPT to give me an answer, I feed it very quantifiable data, and then I ask it to go back and take a look at it and give an interpretation. Now, I've been trained on how to engineer prompts, so I've got lots of training and experience in this, but it is one of the ways in which the world is changing. LLM should not be, I think, taking as the progress in technology. I think physiological sensors that quantify what's going on with our bodies are equally important and more objective. So I'm just curious, Dr. Castro, about your insights in that area.
No, good question. Love it. I agree with what you said. Wearables, it's huge. Taking that to another level, add wearables and edge technology. And in a couple of weeks, we'll have Apple make a big announcement on how the Apple devices are going to be on your phone using AI. And these AIs are going to get so small. And to give you a quick example, imagine you're in the Grand Canyon and someone keels over and you don't know what to do. AI can be embedded to walk you through CPR. Meaning you don't need Wi-Fi, you don't need cell coverage. All that information is already on your device. And so to bring that to the next level, to what you're saying, I just posted in this forum's links and comments. I had posted on Sunday, Apple's working on a patent that basically the AirPods would go in your ear and it's going to be able to have more data for your physician. And for better or worse, it'll be able to know your heart rate, your mental state, your EEG. There's just so many different medical applications from that simple device. And so it's going to take the Apple Watch to another level. And that gap that you're talking about is huge. Imagine as a doctor, if I'm able to see discrepancies in your health at 2 a.m. when your watch is on, that things that you may have never caught or I would have never seen. That type of data, being able to predict that, hey, this conversation that everybody spoke at, there's algorithms that I can analyze your voice and tell you what your sugar is and tell you if you're diabetic or if you're going to have Alzheimer's. I mean, this kind of information is huge. And if I can act on it and tell you, hey, buddy, you're about to get diabetes here in the next 6 months, you're pre-diabetic just on this phone call that we had, then, man, I may be able to save you years of life because now I'm able to prevent diabetes. Now I can jump on it. And that's just a quick example.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think the future of these technologies working together, but the key issue is that the part that scares me is what you mentioned before, is that people who are untrained who become very enthusiastic about these technologies all of a sudden think that they're going to be their own doctors. And I've been doing this for more than 20 years, and I've always worked with doctors. Even when they weren't listening, I found someone who did, because it's so easy to think that you know more than you do. And so that is something you raised, and I agree with you. That is a concern going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ozzy, for those insights and that question. Sarah, you're on. Please go ahead.
Hi guys, it's a pleasure to be with you on here. So I wanted to discuss with you visual LLMs, which is something that we have been working on. We have a health burst lab, which is basically where we test even surgical procedures. And we look at the opportunities for patients to have rentals on the surgical procedures that we have. We've even collaborated with some companies in India where you can find the entire process of the healthcare system, but you are experiencing that onto a virtual platform. So in that case, we were focusing on the quality of life because that's what we noticed that ChatGPT is not really being efficient in. ChatGPT would give me information that might be outdated when I use the models. The second thing, it would be offering me a security compromise when it comes to the patient data. And the third aspect that we were looking at was the fact that the ownership of the data was no longer with the patient. The patient has quite limited knowledge to access this kind of technology. So they're not taught how to program, they're not taught how to set all of these interventions. We have to provide them as metrics and as instructions. You know, we've even we've gone to rural areas where you do not have that kind of education. And an institution that provides you with that kind of education is almost nil. They have to go and find it online, and they have to recheck it. Sorry, it's my kid. Yeah. Sorry, that's an official complaint from my client.
Welcome to join the discussion.
But yeah, so that's what we've discovered. We discovered that the entire patient journey is not connected. The maximum that we were able to do if we isolated that experience was if we have, let's say, a ChatGPT do the assistance, but the doctor was not able to see the patient, which is a very critical point in the healthcare process. So the only way you could really showcase a patient with their Hispanic details, with their medical state and how it evolves, it requires a human connection, because only a doctor knows how to, let's say, notice the particular lesions and then correlate that with another complication, for example, an ulcer, and then correlate that with a mental concept. So the intelligence of a doctor of truly correlating symptoms is no longer measurable in one device. It's not measurable in a single experience. We actually have to collect that and then showcase it. Sometimes you even want to integrate your x-rays. You want to integrate your CT scans. And the only way we found that to be effective was by just joining all of these concepts and delivering them to the doctors through a health burst. So this is my take on it. We've worked with ICU specialists. We've worked with even labs recently. We've worked with the guys that do ICU interventions in pulmonology. We've worked with the guys that work in pharma. We've worked with the guys that just want to, let's say, promote their products and educate the patients about their healthcare options. So once you put in tech, you've pretty much created a dashboard or a toolbox that both the patients and the doctors can access. It's a great touch point. And if you can maximize those touch points, then you have the true monitoring of the patient. It's my perspective. I do not speak for everybody, but from our experience, we've noticed that once we provided these labs, even the doctors were able to test bed them and to try them out. I believe, like Mr. Combs said and Mr. Harvey said, and even Akash, that's where you truly have an experience there that you can maximize on. And then you can correlate it with everything you've read in every textbook, because that's another block for LLMs. They don't get the same access of textbooks that a doctor curates over 7 years or 8 years of their experience. They don't have the in-person intervention that the doctor has, and they don't even know the feeling of your skin. And you can't cover the entire skin of a human being. So that's where we also went back to the health first, because then you can scan your patient, even on the dermatology layer. You can even support them with surgical AI if they intervene into the interior layers of your body. And you can translate all of that knowledge with so many tools. Like even the systems can be integrated with linguistic translations. Sign language is also an option that we've tried to use with AI. So it's just about making healthcare accessible, making it more convenient, and enabling the transference of the human experience from the doctor to the patient and vice versa. Because at any time, even a doctor can turn into a patient, and that's what we've seen since COVID-19. That's how we were like helping those doctors shift those roles. So I'd love your opinions on how your LLM experience could switch, let's say, or change with this kind of experience on the metaverse. If that's okay. I know I took too long, sorry.
No, you're good. I got to run to my next meeting, but feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, and anyone else, feel free to hit me up. And thank you guys for your time, and we'll do this again. Have a great day on my part. I'm going to sign off.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harvey. Yeah, we will connect again on this. And Sarah, thank you so much, Harvey. So Sarah, thank you so much for, in fact, sharing your insights and your learnings. I think that's pretty incredible. So what you talk about in terms of the health burst and other things. So Colin, do you have any thoughts on that? Because there's a lot of moving wheels here in terms of data, in terms of so many other things.
Yeah, I suppose a lot of interesting points there. And I think what Sarah's doing in Charwayne is really impressive. Like when it comes to the LLMs, like as I was saying, there's huge potential with the LLMs. Like that, I think you're correct in the sense that they don't, like, it's going to be very hard to replace the doctor themselves. But like it's going to be a case of that they're going to be an adjunct to patient care, and that they're going to assist us do our job. But the thing about the LLMs is that they're quite good at, they're making good predictions. Like they may be, like when we look at who should we operate on? Who should we perform a surgery on? Like the LLMs can help us, maybe predict surgical outcomes, and that can help us maybe allocate resources to patients efficiently, like who would benefit from an operation versus who may not benefit from an operation. And I think that's something that AI incorporating with LLMs can actually help out with. And then there's also, like, as you were saying, like visualization, that AI visualization, that LLMs can be visual as well. And I suppose they can assist us there with, like, let's say a colonoscopy, like it can assist a gastroenterologist or a surgeon identifying, very subtle polyps or something like that. So I think there's huge potential with them. They're not going to replace a doctor, but I think as an adjunct to clinical care, I think there's huge potentials with the LLMs and how they're actually going to help out.
Thank you so much, Colin. And I think, Sarah, what you mentioned in terms of LLMs, so LLMs definitely know what they know, but then when you talked about doctor being able to maybe write a book or read a book or maybe read a research submitted by his colleagues or other folks, and then maybe look at the same thing and arrive at a different decision or at a different diagnosis, I think that is what really becomes possible of having the human in the loop. And I think that criticality of it must always be understood and really appreciated. So thank you so much, guys, for your time. And thank you, Colin, for joining us here today. All right. So with that, I think we come to an end of the session. So please do feel free to connect with any of us. And if you have any questions for our speakers, please hit them up on LinkedIn, as Harvey already mentioned. And I think we need to have another session on this pretty soon, because such a vast and a huge topic. So let's plan for that as well soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everybody. And if you would like to hear or hear from anyone specifically, or have any particular areas of healthcare, blockchain, AI that you'd like us to do a session on, get in touch with Akash and I.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Okay. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks.